Have you guys ever heard of the terms cutting off family ties, which also called Duan Qin in Chinese? It is a phenomenon where people, especially younger generations, are becoming more reluctant, distant, or even dismissive about interacting with relatives within two generations. In simple words, it is basically about not visiting relatives much anymore, but it is not an official declaration of cutting ties with family. Welcome to our podcast. The topic today is the phenomenon of cutting off family ties. Many young people nowadays choose to reduce or even completely cut off their contacts with distant relatives, while some still believe that family affection is important. We have invited two Gen Z from different age groups to listen to their opinions. Visiting relatives is a tradition in China. In the Lunar New Year just passed, most people return to their hometowns to visit relatives and friends, and this to Gen Z is no exception.
Actually, I spent a great time with my family during this new year, since I always have a really close relationship with my parents and some elders, and I have always worked outside home most of the time in recent years. It's a pleasure time for us to get together every year.
Heidi, 27 years old, from Zhanjiang. Now she is working as an accountant in a media company in Hong Kong.
I had a quite wonderful New Year. Just like usual, I returned to my hometown in Henan province to celebrate the New Year with my grandparents. Yeah, due to the pandemic, it actually has been the third year since I last spent my New Year with them. I really missed the local food and the snowy scenery there. We visit many relatives. I come from a very large family. My mother has 2 elder sisters and my father has 5 siblings. Yeah. This year I spent most of my days at my grandmother's house to celebrate the New Year with them.
Roy is a 18 years old freshman in Hong Kong Baptist University. He comes from Shanghai. A lot of young people nowadays feel like relatives are becoming less and less present in their social circles. How do they feel about the presence of relatives in their life? They seem to have different opinions.
I think the presence of relatives in my life is really high, and they are very important roles in my life. I think that they have a great influence on my daily life and my personalities. And for me, many elders are like experienced and carry friends, and I like to seek for their advice when I met some difficulties, and such as when I met some trouble at work.
This phenomenon is quite general. I would say people are generally growing more distant from their relatives.
During the Spring Festival, many young users wrote about the process of visiting relatives on social media. We don't see each other in the daily life, but exchange insincere greeting during the Spring Festival. I can't even distinguish them among this branch of relatives. It is so embarrassing. It seems to bring more pressure rather than the happiness of reunion to them.
I think I agree with this kind of pressure in some degree. I will also be asked some questions like this that made me uncomfortable, such as asking about my salary or urging me to get married. But I can also understand that they do this because they think it is good for me. But generally speaking, I think this kind of pressure is acceptable and it is difficult to avoid.
For me, I find it really hard to communicate or spend my time with my not such familiar relatives. Yeah, you don't know what to talk with them. You don't know how to. You don't in some extreme occasions. You don't even know how to greet.
Because of the pressure from communicating with some relatives, the phenomenon of Duan Qin becomes more popular among Generation Z. But there are still some people pay much attention to their relatives' relationship.
I can understand such behavior. For me, my family will often care about my life, even when there's nothing special going on, and I will also care about them.
For Roy, he feels sad about this phenomenon, but it is inevitable.
Because of the changes in modern living arrangements, including communication methods, such as mobile phones and maybe video calls, as well as the way people live, say apartments, the distance between people is actually increasing. And, drifting apart from relatives often just happens.
Looking forward to the future perspective of cutting off family ties. It may depend on different family relationship now, but they both think it is a change in the future.
I think I will always have a close relationship with my family in the future, just like now. But the conflict between many people and their families will also always exist. The phenomenon of cutting off may become relatively more common for our generation. Maybe most people will keep a natural relationship with their families.
These family ties will become increasingly faint. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just like watching time pass by and you are powerless and you have no desire. You have no hurt to change this reality. If you try to interview the young people, like 18 years old or even younger, on the street and ask them to name the top 10 most important people in their lives, I think apart from their family, I mean their parents or the elder brother or sister siblings, most of the remaining spots would be occupied by their friends. It also varies from person to person. If there's something to talk about, they might become good friends. I mean, the relatives, where if you are about the same age and you have the same interest, you can talk with other. But most of the time, that's not the case.
Through the recent interviews with two Gen Z friends, although they have different views on whether to cut ties with their relatives, the answers jointly reveal that the maintenance of kinship no longer relies on traditional ethical constraints but has evolved into a dynamic balance based on emotions and practical needs. Then, from a micro-sociological perspective, how should we understand the social phenomenon of cutting ties with relatives? We have invited a sociologist, Kim Dae-hee, from Hong Kong Baptist University, to provide us an explanation.
Based on my research, is higher education has changed many things. It brought values within families, especially towards individualization. There is this interesting study saying that being highly educated doesn't mean that they have only knowledge. Their attitudes, their values, and their perceptions to shape the society would also change. And given that higher education is usually coming from the Western countries, they would impose a lot of liberal attitudes and liberal values. That's also coinciding with the eroding family values as well. If you think about all the family structures nowadays, especially in China, because of the policy to a certain degree, it's very common for parents to, have only one child. And with all this changing family values and family structures, their value system is also changing very much from the traditional family-oriented context to a very much individualized context. So with that in mind, with that as a societal factors, why brought this kinds of the cutting off relatives culture or practice is going on, we can understand in that regard. Because of all the technological innovations, nowadays we see more and more social media, including Twitter, including TikTok, all these kinds of social medias, platforms, they allow these younger generations to connect with broader social connections outside of their own family. Younger generations tend to have a lot of mental stress whenever they see their relatives, because relatives keep asking all these kinds of uncomfortable questions, such as, what about your income? Have you gotten a job? Have you married? If you're not married, then when are you gonna marry? When are you gonna have kids? So these kinds of endless questions, right? But in my viewpoint, if they start to distance themselves from these relatives, right, then there are two paths that we can imagine. The first one is we could easily replace these kinds of traditional families, like relatives and their own nuclear families, with other social network. For example, if they could make a friend, if they could make friends, or if they could make neighbors, if they could expand their social network very easily, they don't really need to stick to their own family. But in most of the cases, that's not the case, It's really hard to replace all the support coming from their own family. So what I could predict is with this ongoing trend of cutting the family ties with their relatives as well as with their own parents' to a certain extent, more and more younger generations are gonna be isolated, socially isolated in the future. So that's what I'm slightly worried about. And there's so much scholarly work going on to figure out the relationship between kin, who is family, and non-kin, who is non-family, but social network like friends or neighbors.
As people are less and less connected with their relatives today, the face-saving culture that the Chinese have worshipped for many years is gradually weakening.
This face-saving culture is already eroding, I think, and it will be weakening even further in the future because I don't think we can reverse the trend of individualism in Asia, in East Asia. So we're going to go on that path even more and more so. And with that trend and with the limited number of families, it's going to be even more to spot that the younger generation is really not making any effort to solidify their family relationships. So with that in mind, what's going to be the future? Of course, it's really hard to replace this family support with only friends and neighbors and outside social network. So more and more younger generation may be falling into the trap of social isolation. They might not have enough ties with anybody, including their relatives, but also like friends as well, or neighbors.
Talking about the future development of this phenomenon, Professor Kim also believed that this is an inevitable change, but community culture has existed for a very long time in East Asia, and Gen Z's attitude toward this in the future will still be influenced by many factors and may undergo a transformation.
Yeah, I don't think it's an exaggeration because there are so many studies saying that in Singapore there is the concept of kampong, but it's kind of like a community spirit where neighbors also know and help each other a lot. But this kampong spirit has been eroding. So again, community spirit has been eroding. Family structure and family values are also eroding at the same time. So, and also it's really hard to imagine for current younger generation to have so many friends, right? Because especially in the East Asian context, the society is really fabricated with the emphasis on higher education, getting into the good university, right? So all these younger generations are pretty much stressed out. They don't want to spend time to build their social network, right? Because they need to study first. So yeah, again, it might be okay when they're working, when they're younger, like in 20s, 30s, it should be okay, even if they don't have so much social network, because they have their jobs, right? And they can see their colleagues at their workplaces. But once they retire, once they get older, social network will really be play an important role in their mental well-being. So all in all, taking everything together, I think social isolation might be the future of I just wanted to emphasize that social network is really important. In the social network, of course, family plays a really, really big role. So I'm a little bit concerned that family structures and family values are eroding so rapidly in East Asian context.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Gen Z's Duan Qin phenomenon. A special thanks to Heidi, Roy, and Professor Kim for sharing their insights. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share your thoughts with us. How do you feel about family ties in your life? Let's keep the conversation going. That's all for today's podcast. Thank you for listening.